trying to kill them. Breaking gay news, I'm so sorry to report that 1 hour ago, Tennessee just passed a bill requiring every single trans kid in their state to detransition within 1 year. Please sign the petition in my bio.
One of the most polarizing topics regarding the LGBT community as of late has been drag queens. Drag is often considered to be a historical and inseparable part of the LGBT community, particularly for that of gay men, and in recent pushes to normalize what is often referred to as queer culture, this aspect has been presented as one of the best ways to inform and entertain children. Major criticism stems from the fact that drag is an adult entertainment which is inherently sexual. Common sense suggests that allowing children in sexual context opens the door to abuse, early sexual exploitation, and dissolution of boundaries. Conservatives also disagree due to the gender nonconformity of the performers, while feminists object to the ways in which drag makes light of women's issues and relies on misogyny to entertain. As a result, it may seem as though feminists and conservatives would align over so-called drag bans, but that is just as incorrect as the belief that they dislike drag shows for the same reasons. While drag itself is built on misogyny, as it makes light of the female experience, creating humor out of the tools of female oppression, to criminalize drag is to infringe on personal expression. It is a slippery slope back towards laws which were often initially in place to restrict women from impersonating men and to keep the class division clear. The argument that clothes should remain gendered is an old one, which is often supported by the Bible in the book of Deuteronomy 22:5, which states, "A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear woman's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this." During westward expansion in the U.S. and the spread of feminism, many women began to switch out their restrictive dresses for a more easily maneuverable male attire, which could also offer safety while traveling and an easier time moving around. There was a gender imbalance in the West, which was meant to be rectified by the additional freedoms offered in a less developed environment, including the ability to work, to own land, and eventually to vote. However, these bounds were not unrestricted and soon were followed by legislation which prohibited the breaking of gender roles. In 1849, Ohio passed a law which prohibited its citizens from publicly presenting themselves in a dress not belonging to his or her sex, and before World War I, 45 cities in the U.S. went on to pass anti-cross-dressing laws. These grounds were used to break up and arrest gay men and women attending bars and other social events, and it wasn't until after Stonewall, when the more androgynous rock and roll of the 70s onward blurred gendered clothing, that these arrests became less common. However, it's important to note that this is not what the Tennessee anti-drag laws criminalize.
Tennessee has just become the first U.S. state to restrict drag.
But not just drag, male and female impersonation. So that means in what I'm wearing right now, I could be charged.
And this has come through just as we're about to go on stage at Sydney World Pride.
The law itself merely states, adult cabaret performance means a performance in a location other than an adult cabaret. That includes topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, strippers, male or female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest, or similar entertainers regardless of whether or not performed for consideration. And 1. It is an offense for a person to engage in an adult cabaret performance, A, on public property, or B, in a location where the adult cabaret performance could be viewed by a person who is not an adult. In other words, this is legislation which is aimed at preventing children from viewing drag because it is an adult sexual performance. This would mean an end to drag queen story time, wherein there have been examples of drag queens with criminal records having access to children when they absolutely shouldn't have. This would mean no longer representing the LGBT community through womanface, or portraying womanhood as a costume. This law doesn't harm drag performers or children, nor would it refer to cross-dressing for regular praise or entertainment, nor regular non-sexual dress, as some have suggested. It doesn't even outlaw drag. This law is not against cross-dressing, as any law which attempted to reenact cross-dressing laws will be easily challenged on various grounds and legal precedent. For example, in the 1970s, U.S. courts began to hear challenges to such laws on both freedom of expression and vagueness grounds. In the City of Columbus v. Rogers, the Ohio Supreme Court heard the appeal of a man who had been convicted under a city ordinance that prohibited individuals from appearing in public in dress not belonging to his or her sex. Taking account of contemporary changes in the manner and style of dress, the court found the ordinance unconstitutionally vague because clothing for both sexes was so similar in appearance that a person of common intelligence might not be able to identify any particular item as male or female clothing. This logic was subsequently applied to strike down cross-dressing laws in a number of cities. In the case of City of Chicago v. Wilson et al., the Supreme Court of Illinois found that individuals had a constitutional liberty interest in their choice of appearance. It connected this liberty interest with the values of privacy, self-identity, autonomy, and personal integrity. The state attempted to justify the ordinance by asserting its interest in preventing crime. The court rejected this argument. The two defendants were transsexuals undergoing psychiatric therapy in preparation for a sex reassignment surgery. There was no evidence of deviant sexual conduct or any other criminal activity. So in the absence of evidence, the court could not assume that individuals who cross-dress for purposes of therapy are prone to commit crimes. McMillan v. Itawamba County School District concerned a teenage lesbian who wished to wear a tuxedo to her school prom. In this case, too, the court relied on the right to freedom of expression. The student argued that wearing a tuxedo had the intent of communicating to the school community her social and political views that women should not be constrained to wear clothing that has traditionally been deemed female attire. The court agreed that wearing a tuxedo is a form of expressive conduct protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. Other legislation referred to as Antitrans tends to refer to restrictions on gender transition for minors and on protecting sex-based rights and protections for women.
Another anti-trans bill was just passed a few days ago in Tennessee that is forcing all trans people, even trans teens, to medically detransition within only 1 year. And because they are turning this into a felony, this basically means that anyone who doesn't go by the bill can and will be arrested and locked up. It is February, and it was 80 degrees a few days ago, yet you're still worried about the lives of trans people. Leave us alone and focus on the real issue. Sign the petition in my bio to stop this.
These laws are meant to protect children from what trans activists claim never happens, and to protect women from losing hard-earned acknowledgement of sex-based protections and needed remedies. Examples include ARSB 199, concerning medical malpractice and gender transition in minors and to create the Protecting Minors from Medical Malpractice Act of 2023. GASB 140, which limits the treatment of gender dysphoria in minors performed in hospitals and other licensed healthcare facilities and prohibits certain surgical procedures for the treatment of gender dysphoria in minors. And IASF 482, a bill for an act prohibiting persons from entering single and multiple occupancy restrooms or changing areas and other facilities in elementary and secondary schools that do not correspond with the person's biological sex, and including effective date provisions. This information is not hard to find. If one has a passing interest in laws regarding trans topics, the legislation is often simple and easy to read, revealing something entirely different from the so-called transgenocide many claim these to be a part of.
Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
Even if most people are getting their information secondhand, those who consider themselves to be authority figures in this community should have read these laws and disseminated what was inside them. But as anyone can see, this is not true. Few seem to know what anti-drag or anti-trans laws supposedly contain, besides being applicable to trans individuals in some way and being connected to Republican lawmakers. And yet, they are presented as if they are the same as death warrants for anyone who identifies as non-binary. In other words, this is once again a case of fearmongering, easily dispelled by reading the legislation itself. Of course, when one views language as violence, it might be easy to read this as a personal attack. But the law itself merely prevents children from interacting with adult entertainment, no different from banning children from accessing porn. Considering how often any law which even vaguely addresses trans topics is construed to be an act of genocide, I find it far more likely that this fearmongering is done purposefully, to continue to further a prosecution complex that fuels the trans community and keeps it in a place of victimization. A role that has in turn been used to bully itself into a place of authority amongst minorities as the most oppressed group of all groups. This same group produces violence against both women and children.
I never thought I would see something like this happen in my lifetime, but here we are. This is what happens to women who are standing up for women's rights in 2023.
not merely ideological, which transgender individuals often portray as being the same as physical. No one is safe from this violence. Not the elderly, not those who should rightfully fall into the category they denote as queer elders, and certainly not children, who risk to lose the most from misapplied gender-affirming care. In the face of the Nashville shooting, I find it particularly malicious that many within the trans community are framing this tragedy as a justifiable reaction to legislation meant to protect minors, and seem to be more concerned with the way that this tragedy will reflect on their group, rather than concerned about the cause of the violence or on preventing a similar occurrence in the future.
Incorrect. There are still over 400 anti-LGBT laws being proposed throughout the country. Just because this atrocity happened, that I'm sure every single trans person you've ever seen has denounced, does not mean that it's not still happening.
This echoes past examples of bad behavior, such as sexual grooming or misconduct, which is often treated as being bad for the way it reflects on the trans community, rather than for the sake of the action itself. A lack of accountability, as well as the continuation of both murderous and suicidal rhetoric, has undoubtedly played a role in the creation of violent actors within the trans community. It doesn't help that discussion even now seems to center on how this will lead to targeting of the trans community, more victimization, more navel-gazing, rather than any actual action that might mitigate well-founded fears about the community and its impact on everyone else.
Trigger warning, Nashville. I want to make something absolutely clear right now. The actions of the Nashville shooter are vile and disgusting, and he deserves to rot in hell. We use his correct pronouns, not out of respect for him, but out of respect for the entire trans community. This is what the transphobes have been waiting for. They've been waiting for this moment where a trans person snaps and does something disgusting. As a result, the trans community is going to see a dramatically increased wave of hate. Right now, more than ever, we need our allies in our corner. We need our allies defending us, and we need to continue to respect all trans people's pronouns, including this disgusting excuse for a human being's pronouns. That's all I have for this one. Bye.
This, dear viewers, is where we part. I don't want to talk about the shooter of the Nashville event until we have more information, but I certainly think that the way that everyone else is treating this act is just deplorable. Kids died. And I understand that this is something that happens a lot here in the US. I mean, I've lost someone in my family to gun violence. And we just continue going on with it. We hear someone else die every week. There is another mass shooting, someone being shot going to the grocery store or to school. It's awful. And the fact that this is being viewed as this shouldn't be a reflection of the community, or it should reflect on the community, etc., instead of just being a tragedy, instead of looking at this and saying, what can we do to prevent this? The fact that it's being politicalized and weaponized, it's awful. And I'm not someone who comments particularly on gun stuff, on other kinds of politics. My stuff is literally just feminism, so I'm not going to go into this topic too much. I don't want to go into gun violence too much. But just this was a horrible thing to have to learn about. And I sincerely hope that going forward, there is some kind of accountability for what happened. That we hear more information, we know what happened, and that there is some step towards preventing this from happening again. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them down below. This week's password is Xbox, because that's what I'm watching as I am editing this video. I did put a post up yesterday, because this should be put out tomorrow, about question and answers, and you guys just gave me more video ideas. That's not what I meant. I meant questions for me. I meant like fun little questions for me, and I don't think that got through very well. But if you have any questions, like for a fun question and answer kind of thing, feel free to leave them there and I'll answer them. And I'll see you guys next time.